Okay, friends, here's a quick overview of the digestive system. I'll try to run through it as quick as I can. So if we just go through the parts and pieces, here's the oral cavity, buccal cavity. So we move down the esophagus, notice the interesting spelling, British. Coming here is the liver and the gallbladder underneath there, and stomach, large intestine, small intestine, and of course out the end, so to speak. And there's the little appendix. So if we start at the mouth, we have obviously the salivary glands, which produce the saliva. We also have the pancreas, and back there was the liver and the gallbladder. So let's start at the mouth. So the important part about the mouth, of course, is that when this guy ingests, that's when we're putting food into your mouth, the big deal here obviously is going to be your teeth. And of course there's your tongue. And it's basically mechanical digestion, physically breaking down, in this case looks like some kind of cracker, bread, whatever, into smaller pieces, and that aids in creating more surface area later on for the enzymes to work on. Of course, you wouldn't want to choke on it as it's going down. Now, chemically what's happening, of course, is you recall that those little things coming out here would represent saliva, and you have 3 pairs of salivary glands, mandibular, submandibular, etc., but we just need to know them as salivary glands. And remember, they contain the enzyme salivary amylase, which breaks down starch down into the double sugars. Actually, it breaks it down in maltose. And of course, the tongue helps in this process by moving the food around. If you didn't have a tongue, you couldn't stick it out at somebody, so that's another helpful thing. And you might know that people actually eat tongue, like cow tongue and such, because it is a muscle. It's a pretty interesting muscle with all the receptors on it and the degree of control. And actually just a sensory receptors. Like if you feel your teeth, you can really feel like every nook and cranny. There's lots of receptors. Okay, so after you swallow, and here's the bolus of food, it's called going down, and that little flappy thing kind of covers over, that's the epiglottis, so it doesn't go down the trachea. We're going down the esophagus, and here's that peristalsis motion, which pushes it on down, and you kind of go behind the liver there, and right down in the stomach, right in the tummy. And of course, within the stomach, there's more juices being mixed in. There's a mixture of hydrochloric acid, and there's also the pepsin, and very, very acidic. And the pepsin starts breaking down proteins to smaller polypeptides. So the polypeptides, remember, are smaller proteins. After that, it leaves the stomach. It's going to end up in the small intestine. And here's coming in again for a second time. Pretty cool. And hydrochloric acid, kind of, as I said before, kind of softens up the ligaments and the things that hold the meat together. That's one thing it does. But it also kills any harmful bacteria. And there's a sphincter muscle here. Remember, the sphincter muscles kind of open up and close as that peristalsis, which starts in the esophagus, goes down through. And then the food enters into the small intestine. And even though, remember, it's 20 feet long or so, this small has to do with the diameter. So once it enters into the small intestine, I'm going to stop it here, there's more secretions coming. But remember, bile stored in the gallbladder, formed by the liver, helps emulsify or break down the fats and oils into smaller globules, more surface area. And the pancreas itself here, and here's the pancreas, also secretes and produces enzymes which also enter in the small intestine. So liver, gallbladder, pancreas produce things, but they actually dump into the small intestine. And you might recall that the pancreas produces a lipase to break down the lipids. It produces some proteases which help break down the proteins. And again, we see amylase again, breaking down starch. So here we start it up again. So as these would represent the different enzymes coming in. We scope back to the liver just to show that again. It's a little redundant here, but there's a huge gland in your body. And again, this is where the bile is produced and gets stored in the gallbladder. But remember, the liver also detoxifies materials for you. So eat something that's poisonous, the blood first actually goes to the liver from your digestive system, which is a good thing. And the pancreas, I just got done mentioning, the digestive enzymes formed there. And later on we'll find out that insulin, glucagon, and some other hormones are formed there. So this is both a digestive enzyme. It's also what we call an endocrine gland too, parts of it. Again, you can see that those nice ducts that lead out of there. When I say ducts, I'm referring to like tubes, not quack quack duck kind of thing. Okay, once the food is in the small intestine, it keeps moving on, and at this point, it's getting pretty much broken down to its smaller parts. So the sugars are now single sugars for the most part. Now we have amino acids. Now we have fatty acids and glycerol. The next step, now that digestion is open, we need to get this stuff absorbed. And this clearly occurs in, well, at least most of it occurs in the small intestine. When we look at the small intestine, you might recall that we have these little, I'll stop it again here, these little finger-like projections all throughout the small intestine called villi. And if you were to cut one open in cross-section, you would see what they look like. And here we go. And kind of like the drawing I made on the board. Now the red and the blue represent the blood vessels, and the yellow part represents the lymphatic vessels. And these are capillaries, very small little blood vessels that can absorb things there. And so, as I said, that the water-soluble materials, because water is mostly blood, things like simple sugars and amino acids get absorbed in the blood supply. But the fat-soluble materials might be some fat-soluble vitamins and also the glycerol and things like that. Even they get picked up by this what's called a lacteal, which is part of your lymphatic system. But this whole little structure is what the villi looks like. And once it gets absorbed into the blood, then it does what nutrients do. And this kind of represents them in the bloodstream now. Those little red blood spots zipping by, and that might be the food particles, small food particles, etc., that you picked up in your body. And remember that nutrients get used for energy, for respiration, and also amino acids get rearranged to make proteins for your body, etc., etc., etc. I'm going to scoot ahead a little bit here. And the last part of our digestive system is going to be the large intestine. And so now that they've left the small intestine, and now they're going up the ascending colon, transverse colon, and the descending colon, but we just call it the big large intestine. Remember, the major function of the large intestine is, for our purposes, going to be about reabsorbing that water and compacting the materials for feces so it will literally go out the end, so to speak. And don't forget, there's also, I believe, and I know this fact, there's also a lot of bacteria throughout your large intestine which are very helpful, beneficial in producing vitamins for us. Specifically, vitamin K is one of them, not to mention some of the B complex. So I'm not sure if this helped, but I hope it does.